Hello, everyone. This is Steve Davenport, and I'm here with Clem Miller. And Skeptic's Guide to Investing is going into the crust of the earth and looking at rare earth metals and how do rare earths affect the economy, trade relationships with China, and just in general, what are rare earths and how are they and why are they important? So, Clem, if I was to summarize why rare earths matter, um, what do you think is the most important thing about rare earths and how they affect our economy?
So the most important thing about the more common, so first of all, rare earths are a series of elements, right? They're quite common, actually quite common in the Earth's crust. It's just that, everybody talks about China's near monopoly on rare earths. And the reason why China has a near monopoly is actually because they've been willing to process rare earths and take the environmental damage from that. It costs a lot environmentally in terms of environmental damage to process rare earths. And China is less concerned about the environment, or traditionally has been less concerned about the environment. And that's why you have a lot of the rare earths processing capacity in China and not in other parts of the world. So I just wanted to mention that point. But you ask about essentially where is the demand for rare earths? What is it about rare earths that makes it in demand? And some of the more common rare earths are those that are used in these super magnets. So you might be familiar with these toys where you've got these like super magnetic balls that connect to each other. That's called neodymium. When neodymium is one of the more common rare earths, and and the reason why these super powerful magnets are useful is because they can be used in various kinds of engines, various kinds of motor applications. So, many of you who have had, sort of elementary physics or whatnot will know that you use magnets in motors. Magnets are a key. Now, you can have iron bars that are magnetized, or you can also help that along by actually magnetizing things that are already magnetized, such as this neodymium. And so neodymium and other rare earth metals have a lot of applications in things like wind turbines, in um, in batteries, in AI to some degree. Uh, so in defense applications, and if you throw that in with lithium, which is not considered a rare earth, you got this sort of kind of critical, uh, minerals kind of designation, right? Which is originally it was a U.S. Bureau of Mines kind of definition or DOE definition of things that are important for the energy transition and AI and whatnot, and so that's rare earths plus lithium, maybe a few other. Sometimes people throw copper into that mix as well, because obviously copper is used for electric and electronic applications. So that's why it's important. There's a lot of demand from the renewable energy sector, from the AI sector, and rare earths and the defense sector. And rare earths are important. And for the environmental reasons I mentioned, China was willing to accept environmental damage in order to become a large processor. But other than that, there are a lot of rare earths around. And when you look at countries that the other countries outside of China that have large deposits of other kinds of minerals, like Canada and Australia, or the western part of the US, uh, there are rare earths in those areas. It's just they haven't been developed as much. And so, there's now an effort to try to expand development of those. And so the US, today under Trump, back under Biden, there's been an effort to try to create sort of mineral security partnerships among countries. So US and Australia, US and Canada, to try to develop these non-Chinese rare earth deposits. And
But
in fact,
yes,
we just saw, I don't know if you saw this, Steve, we just saw a uh, Trump meet with the Australian Prime Minister,
yep. I
uh,
was gonna
and
mention.
and among other things, uh, one of the more serious things they talked about was a rare earths agreement. And I also saw coming across my LinkedIn that my old employer from many years ago, the Export Import Bank, just signed some or allocated some letters of interest to which could potentially fund U.S. exports to Australian mining companies for the purpose of building rare earths. So I don't know what those U.S. exports would be. I don't know, like Caterpillar tractors or John Deere equipment or whatnot to try to um, support the mining developments that are already there.
Yeah, I find it frustrating that Trump and this efforts with Canada. I mean, Canada has great natural resources that we should be looking to figure out how we get more of, not how to alienate them as a partner. Because obviously it's a lot easier and more and safer supplier to have Canada producing these than China. So I like what we're doing with Australia. I think we should be doing more with Canada. And whenever we add Greenland as a state, the 52nd state, that also I think might, offer some opportunities. So I find that, you get a lot more with sugar than you do with um, sour. So I think it's, a mistake for us not to be pursuing rare earths with Canada and letting China know that we're not going to be beholden to them for this this resource that we need. I agree with, I think people who say, let's just drill here, don't understand the environmental damage it causes or the amount of energy it uses. So if we're going to have a lot of energy demand from crypto mining and we're going to have a lot of energy demand from AI, and we're going to add energy demand from rare earth production,
Yeah.
I think it's better to spread these things out and to have multiple suppliers. And Canada and Australia seem like ideal partners in this exercise.
So
Why haven't we done this sooner? I guess is
yeah,
my question. It's not like
yeah.
suddenly we realize the rare earths are mostly from China, right?
I think we've known about that for years and years. It's just that it's just that it's just that China is beginning to flex its muscles in various ways. Um, they just a few years ago, they actually, in response to U.S. export controls on semiconductor exports to China, they actually put export controls on the export of gallium and germanium to the U.S. And I don't know that you would consider gallium and germanium rare earths, but they're used as what are referred to as doping materials, quote unquote, for semiconductor chips. So they're used to kind of,
Slow down the signal.
yeah, I guess so. I'm not sure what a doping material means in a semiconductor context, but that's what gallium and germanium are, and China was restricting those exports as
Okay.
as
I
a
got a, I got a question for you.
yeah.
And if you get this question right, I'm going to give you a star and maybe I'm going to send you something in the mail. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds like you saying there's no way Clem can know the answer to this
Say
question.
that. I'm just saying, I'm giving you an opportunity. Your brain is rested after 30 days of sake and sushi, and your body has a high content in mercury right now, but it's going to be, your brain is very capable. What country has the most Chinese spies located in its border?
What country has the most Chinese spies
Mhm.
in terms of number of spies?
Yeah, there's a number of spies.
Well, I'm going to say the US.
Wrong. The Netherlands, because the
Oh,
Netherlands
because of
is
ASML?
ASML, and
Right.
China, since the US has cut off the sending of ASML equipment for certain level chips, China is trying to figure out on their own how to, so I think that when we all think about this technology race and we think of it as a kind of a nice thing to follow on the weekend when we're reading Barron's, it's really about real people trying to get ahead. And China is not fooling around. China wants to have the AI race in their favor. I think they've done a great job on solar, and they're probably the leading producer right now of equipment and solar technology. And I think they want to be the same in AI. DeepSeek is coming out with a new version or a new rev of their software sometime in December, which is another reason why I kind of believe that it's a good time to take some chips off the table, because the first time DeepSeek came out, everybody was shocked and didn't know much about it. Well, now everybody's been warned and they've gone back and they've made it better. And the question is, again, is the US overspending on a lot of this development if China can develop DeepSeek and get production or capabilities similar to ChatGPT with 1/50th the investment? I think that we have a competitor, and if we don't wake up and look at that competitor and then figure out how we can create alliances and other things to make up for that competitor, we're gonna fall behind.
Yeah.
And I think that the rare earths and what's going on with them, I believe, are going to be the gating item that slows down AI. And if it does slow down AI, the multiples of those companies based on deployment on more and more servers and more uses will have to be limited. And if something like DeepSeek comes along and does it for a lot less, do people try to take more of a software approach instead of a technology approach to making the best AI? I think it could transform what's going to happen in this space. And so, when I look at what's going on with an Oklo, up 625 year to date, I say those names and those numbers don't justify when you think about a real return on investment coming in maybe 3 years, but closer to 5 years for quantum and other things. I
Yeah.
believe that we're in a point where there's going to be a correction, and a lot of people are going to get shaken out. And these things, like the internet in 2000, and like some of the things we've done in 2008 after the correction, people are not going to be able to stay in as they see the declines happen in this AI space. So
Yeah.
better to do something now, 2% off of the top, than something later when DeepSeek, takes some people's lunch money.
I think so.
Are
Just
you
to,
worried about China being the leader in AI?
am I worried about that? Uh, yes, and I think we should all be worried about that. Um, but I think
Do you think they
let's,
could leverage rare earths and punish the US to give them more access to chips unless they, hold AI over Trump's head and say, hey, without more access to chips, we're not going to give you any rare earths?
well, I think it was very interesting, from a Trumpian perspective, tariffs are, your all-purpose go-to cudgel for anything, right? And it was very interesting that uh, you had this sort of departure from that when they announced, some months ago, much to my shock, actually, that uh, if NVIDIA and AMD, maybe it was, gave 10% of their revenue stream from China to the U.S. government, that the U.S. government would allow exports of these chips. I thought that was, I don't know if that was sheer stupidity, which is possible, or whether there was some kind of underlying strategy to that. Um, I just don't know. But um, I agree with your fundamental premise that China wants to be the number one player in AI, and that they will, do a lot to try to achieve that, including potentially do things vis-a-vis Taiwan, which is why it's very important, not just from Taiwan Semiconductor's perspective, but from the perspective of the rest of the world, that Taiwan Semiconductor continue to build out its fab capacity in Arizona and Japan and Germany.
Yeah, I mean, everybody talks about that, but it's really just a drop in the bucket compared to Taiwan's impact on semiconductors worldwide. I mean, some ridiculous number like 80% of the everything less than 5 nano, it comes from
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Taiwan semi. So
Right,
I mean,
it comes, it's made by Taiwan Semiconductor, but an increasing percentage of Taiwan Semiconductor's sales are actually now manufactured outside of Taiwan. It's an increasing
yeah.
percentage.
I mean, I've also heard from people who visited some of the new facilities in Arizona that they're having trouble finding labor force to
Yeah.
staff. So we can have the building, but if you don't have the people with the experience, guess what? It's going to be hard for us to make Arizona chip capital of the
Right.
world. I think
I
that,
guess it's also a little surprising to me that Arizona was chosen because they don't have the clean water, or they don't have as much clean water, and clean water is a necessity for chip production.
yeah, I think that political decisions about who gets subsidies and who gets, I mean, we've talked about that, is it's very hard to see how the government can make a decision about what's the optimal capital when you should probably just let the people figure it out and let the businesses locate where they think is the right location because they probably know. But I guess I'd like to kind of wrap on this rare earth and get to the point, which is rare earth metals a reason for us to be concerned about the AI rally?
Yes.
And so do you see it as a potential catalyst to some downside in AI?
Yes. I mean, I would say that if you're if if you're highly invested in AI directly or indirectly, you should pull some of that down and put it into uh, really just sort of build up cash. I'm not saying you should be in more cyclical sectors, but I
No,
wouldn't.
I'm just saying that I think everybody's expecting this U.S.-China summit on the side of the Korean conference or the meetings between
Yeah,
Trump and Xi. I feel could be a turning point in not a good way.
I
And
agree. I
I,
agree.
I
I mean, look at what happened with look at what's happening with this so-called Hungary, Budapest, Putin Trump summit. On again, off again, on again, off again. I mean, just the failure to interpret things. How Witkoff failed to understand what the desires of the different sides were in the Russia-Ukraine context. I just think that we're dealing with an administration that is has shown some competency issues, and I don't know, and you've got foreign powers that have um, a level of distrust towards the U.S. On account of the current administration, and so I think that throws a wrench into things too. So I think, the chances of successful, meaningful summits that lead to anything other than kind of um, showy results as opposed to substantive results, performative results, let's put it that way, I think are, small, right? I don't think we're dealing with an economic diplomacy that is anything beyond just performative. I'll give you an example, right? Not to throw shade on my prior organization that I was affiliated with, but the Exim Bank, right? When they issued these letters of interest, they're presenting them as if they're real deals, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but a letter of interest, I mean, there are no exporters identified yet, as far as I know, right? They're just, oh yeah, we're willing to provide some financing, potentially for U.S. exports to these rare earths plants. So it looks like a signing, it looks like a deal, but it's not really a deal.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I hate to say this because I don't have a crystal ball, but my implications of this meeting with Trump, I believe that if this rare earth, gets to be worse situation and China withholds rare earths, I think we could see a 20% decline in the market. If we were to see, as I've talked about in the past, China do anything to blockade or to try to control Taiwan, I think we could see a 40% decline.
yeah,
I think both incidences are not imminent, but they certainly are on the radar, and they should be on the radar for
yeah, I
most people.
wouldn't I wouldn't necessarily agree with you on on those percentages, right? I think it might be less. But it is kind of interesting. And it is kind of interesting that if you look at the last few months of performance in the technology sector, broader technology sector, you've got some of the Mag 7 that have performed a lot less well than the hardware manufacturers like Broadcom and Arista and Taiwan Semi and some others, right? Those companies have been doing quite well, whereas you've got Microsoft and Amazon and so on not doing as well. All right. So now granted, those are users of AI, they're the cloud companies. So they're part of the space and maybe they're the canary in the coal mine, really. Um, but I don't know. I mean, the
Yeah,
hardware manufacturers have been doing well. So, or the networking companies, those who supply the like comfort systems
yeah,
that supply equipment into the data centers, those companies have been doing quite well. So it's kind of a mix, and I would say don't look at it as a single theme, but rather you got to be picky and choosy about which companies you're investing in.
yeah. I mean, I just look at the market and say it's getting narrower. The idea that it was going to broaden out and affect more things and have a general rally. If you take away the AI names, and I know that there's a lot of them that have partials like Google and Microsoft, they all have a component, but the market has no gains if you take away AI. And so we're up 15% on the whole market, but it's driven by 20 or 30% of the market, maybe 40% of the market that has 100% of the gains. The other 60%, not so much.
Right.
And that's why the weakness in jobs, and that's why some of the other questions about this economy are still out there. And that's why I think the Fed lowered rates. I think they'll lower rates again. I think they'll lower rates again in December. So those two lowers, but I think what we're seeing is it's not translating out into the 7 and 10 year. It's translating on the front of the curve, but it's not translating out to the far end of the curve where the US real estate market really needs it to be. So I think as we start to see a pullback here, whether it's rare earth or whether it's Taiwan, I think people need to be safe, and you know, it's getting dangerous out there, folks. And I hope you realize and just try to keep learning as we are about rare earths and everything else that comes up on a daily basis that we've not heard a lot about. I
Yeah.
think the moves in Australia and Canada are good. I think that some of the other suppliers are very unstable countries of rare earths. So we hope, maybe we'll do some research and come up with a name that we think would be a safe name for people to invest in who want to own some rare earth exposure. Maybe that's, the way to get this is not always through software. And as Clem's saying, hardware is doing a little better. And we've noticed at Circa Capital that, yeah, it's software has been the weaker part of
Yeah.
the technology space.
Right. There aren't many rare earths companies that you can buy on the stock market. Unless you're like investing,
I was thinking of a larger mineral company like a Rio that might
right.
have a rare earth component. And
Yeah, but as a small part of it, they're more like
I know, but
copper
they're probably going to get bigger, right?
but there are some companies that focus on lithium.
Yep,
And for example, Albemarle
yep,
and
tomorrow.
SQM focus on lithium. And so again, lithium is not a rare earth, but it's important to the EV
Batteries.
and batteries and whatnot. So
Okay.
uh,
Well, everyone, I think this has been a great discussion. And
yeah.
do you have anything else to add, Clem?
I would just say, you use the term dangerous time in the market or whatever it was you said, dangerous. And I would say I agree that I wouldn't necessarily say dangerous, but I would say highly uncertain time in the market where, you've got especially, you've seen a lot of increase in the market lately. It seems to have plateaued. There seems to be a lot of volatility from day to day. The VIX is up, the volatility index or the fear index. So I don't know if you want to call it dangerous, call it uncertain, but I
Called
think
it the frothy fourth. I think that's
frothy, right? Frothy fourth quarter. I would say, if you want to define froth as including both downside and upside, right? Um, I would say that despite the high uncertainty and the volatility, I mean, Steve, I think you would agree with me that you do need to stay in the stock market. Maybe not
yes,
100%, maybe not even 80% or 70%, but you got to stay invested.
correct. I'm not saying to get out. All I'm saying is think about taking profits to keep yourself in line and balanced. Think about hedging a part of the market that you think could be more at risk. And think about, if you need help, seek an advisor. Um, I work at Circa Capital, and we try to help clients with derivatives and also with active management strategies. I think there are people out there who can help you to get to where you want to be in this market, where you have exposure, but you also have some downside protection. And I think that as we move forward, putting on and taking off protection will be, as taxes go up, I see the need for more protection as we go forward because I don't think people will be selling as much when and if we see an increase in tax rates, which I think, given our large deficits, is highly likely. So I just want people to be aware that these risks are out there and there are ways to mitigate them if you need help. So anyway, that's it for today. If you please like us, share us with your friends, and we'll look forward to coming at you in another 2 weeks with more episodes and more ideas to try to improve your investment IQ. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, Steve.